exciting to be here. This is my first time in Africa, and I had the opportunity to go into the bush, and I've just fallen in love with the country and the continent. So it's really exciting to talk about how blockchain technology has tremendous potential, but particularly here in Africa. A little bit about me. In addition to my work at Singularity University, I'm a partner in a fund that actually invests in blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, or as I prefer to call them, digital assets. That said, in this presentation, we're really going to be focused on blockchain technology. So how many of you have heard of Bitcoin? Obviously, everyone in the room, but how many people really think about blockchain technology, which is the technology that makes Bitcoin possible, but is much more than Bitcoin? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So why are we talking about blockchain technology? We're talking about some pretty incredible technologies here at Singularity University, from digital biology to manufacturing and space. And why blockchain? And it's not because of the crazy volatile price of Bitcoin. It's because, the business, okay, sorry. The blockchain business value, so the business value that can be generated from blockchain technology, taking cryptocurrencies and digital assets totally aside. So we discount Bitcoin, we discount Ethereum and all the others, and we only think about the value that can come to business from this technology. Gartner Research predicts that the value will be 3.1 trillion or more by 2030. That's not very far away. And a lot of that growth really occurs exponentially, 2025 and on. And so there's just tremendous opportunity here, and particularly in Africa. And why is that? So in much of the developed world, our financial institutions, our public infrastructure is good enough. It works. Doesn't mean blockchain can't make it better. But here in Africa, we have some problems that blockchain in particular can potentially help to solve. So one of those problems is that more than 2/3 of land ownership in Africa is insecure. That problem is actually much better in South Africa than in other countries in Africa, but it's still a tremendous problem. And what happens is when property ownership is insecure, when you can't prove that you own your land, guess what? It gets really hard to borrow money based on that land. If you can borrow money based on your land, if you can prove you own your land, you can borrow money based on your land, well, then you can go ahead and buy capital needed to improve your farm. And it's a key aspect of taking people out of poverty. So how can blockchain potentially solve that problem? Well, okay, I'm sorry, I'm having an issue with the clicker. So one of the tremendous things that's happening today is Bitland is a company. It's a small startup, but Time Magazine actually called it one of the 50 most genius companies of 2018. And what Bitland is doing is they're sending surveyors into towns in Ghana, getting to know the local communities, working with the local governments and chiefs, and starting to put land records onto a blockchain database. And that's really important because once the land records are on a blockchain-based database, when new people come to power, they can't just change an entry in the database. The blockchain records are secure, and we're gonna talk about that. So why blockchain technology? Why would you want to use blockchain technology to solve this problem around land ownership? Why would you use blockchain technology and just not a normal database, an AWS database? What blockchain technology lets us do is it lets us create a decentralized database. And with a decentralized database, what you have is the ability to share and store information in a decentralized way. So if this conference, if our room were to become a decentralized blockchain-based database, instead of the person at the front having control over the information, being the one with access to the information, every single person in the room could have a node and could have their own copy of the information. And that's powerful. Why is that powerful? Well, first, with a blockchain-based database, you can't just delete the edit history. So I started to talk about that with this Bitland example. If you live in a country where the government is corrupt, and if the wrong person becomes the chief or the wrong person becomes the mayor or the governor, and they can go ahead and change an entry in a database or change a record in a courthouse and say that your land belongs to their friend, your land ownership is not secure. But with blockchain, with a blockchain-based database, if that chief or that mayor, that governor wanted to go in and change the record, the fact that they changed it would be timestamped. And it would be addressed with their signature that they changed it. And so think about the radical change in transparency that now happens. And the other thing about blockchain technology that's very, very powerful is the way that it supports trust. So this is a picture of one of the most powerful stories of history. In World War I, on Christmas Eve, the fighting forces in Germany and the Allies actually declared a spontaneous decentralized truce along the Western Front. So these soldiers who the day before and the day after are shooting at each other have their shared cultural understanding and their shared celebration of Christmas that allows them to create this truce. Now, what happens when you have parties that don't trust each other and they don't necessarily have Christmas? They can have blockchain, right? And so with blockchain technology, you can actually support cooperation and trust among parties who wouldn't otherwise trust each other. And so when you think about two companies that don't necessarily trust each other, two countries or more countries that don't necessarily trust each other, that's where you want to start thinking about using blockchain. But as we discuss this technology and its incredible potential and the incredible value that it has for business in our world, I do want to share a big caution as we think about this. So garbage in, garbage out. What does that mean? Well, if you take data and that data is fake or that data is corrupt and you put that corrupt fake data into a blockchain, you've just got a very secure, safe way of storing fake data. And that's why when we think about these blockchain-based solutions that I'm going to share with you in the talk, and you think about using blockchain technology in your own businesses and in your own lives, you want to be thinking about this key human problem of how does the data get entered into the system. And you want to be thinking about how do you have dispute resolution processes for fixing the data if false data gets entered into the system. So it's important to remember. So how many people here have used a smart contract? Okay, I'm not seeing many hands, but I have great news for you. I'm pretty sure every single one of you has used a smart contract. So smart contracts are not actually legal, right? What a smart contract is a piece of executable code that once it's going, it continues to execute without additional human intervention. So has anyone here ever used automatic bill payment or automatic renewal of a web service like Amazon or Netflix? I'm seeing some nods, there are more hands. So congratulations, you've used a smart contract. But what's powerful and new about blockchain technology is that you can pair smart contracts with these incredibly secure databases, right? And that makes possible a whole new range of applications. But good news for everyone who's a lawyer in the room, I too am a lawyer, smart contracts are not going to replace legal contracts. So we're still gonna need legal contracts, there will still be mistakes. There might sometimes be garbage in, garbage out, and we're gonna need that dispute resolution and that mediation. So lawyers, your jobs are safe. Some people might be less happy about that than others, but. And what happens when you take smart contracts and you pair smart contracts with that decentralized database where you can't delete the edit history and you can support trust among parties that normally don't trust each other, what you get is the ability for money to become programmable. You can program money. So what does that mean? I'm gonna share with you a pretty powerful example that's supporting the rainforest in South America right now, and I'm sure there are ways of taking this idea and applying it to Africa. So right now, people care a lot about conserving the rainforest in the Amazon, but there's a problem, which is that local industry can pay a lot more and to local indigenous people than conservationists to take over land. And so what the folks at Gainforest are doing, Gainforest is a new nonprofit, what they're doing is they're setting up a blockchain-based system so that if you are a person who cares about saving the rainforest, you can actually pledge money, you give the money into the blockchain-based system, and that money goes to indigenous communities. But it goes to the indigenous communities in the form of a smart contract. What's the smart contract? Well, what Gainforest does is they use satellite imagery data of the Earth. So remember, today, in today's world, we take satellite imagery data of the Earth multiple times a day, and it's incredibly accurate. And you can use machine learning and data analytics to analyze that satellite imagery data, and you can tell very precisely whether trees in a particular area are left alive. And if those trees are still there in 60 days, 90 days, 3 months, 6 months, different amounts of money pledged by donors automatically unlocks to the communities responsible for protecting those trees. And it means that it's much faster and easier and less expensive, there's less legal work involved to actually get money from the donors and the people who want to save the trees to the people who live in those communities and actually have the power on the ground to save them. So here's another way that blockchain technology is being used today. And this is pretty incredible because it's being used by some of the largest companies on the planet, some of the largest industries on our planet for international shipping. So last July, in July of 2016, Maersk, the largest international shipping company, and IBM partnered in a pilot. And that pilot involved the shipment of avocados from Mombasa in Kenya to Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And what Maersk and IBM said is that 20 to 30% of the cost of shipping perishable goods from one place to another, one country to another, can come down to administrative and documentation costs. Because if when you're shipping, you can't just take goods from one country to another. You've got to fill out paperwork, and you've got to make sure that your paperwork is stamped properly, and it's stamped by the right people. And on the Kenyan side, you sometimes would have people in motorcycles taking documents and going from official to official, getting the right stamps in the right order. It's not easy to do that, and if it takes too long, the avocados can spoil. And so what happened to Maersk was Maersk is the one actually doing the shipping with the real assets, but Maersk was having margins in the red, and small regional shippers were making margins of 15 to 20%. And what those small regional shippers would do is they'd be the middlemen standing between the shipments and actually getting all that documentation done on time, because they were the ones with the relationships who could help speed up getting your shipment properly documented. And what Maersk and IBM were able to do is they were able to take what was a paper process and put it into an electronic system. And this is the key part about blockchain technology, because the folks at Maersk spent hundreds of millions of dollars ultimately on this program. So it's not that they weren't willing to spend money. It's not that they're not smart. Why are they only digitizing the documentation of international shipping in 2016? Why not do it 10 years ago with the advent of the internet? And it's because of the issues of security and audit trail. So if those avocados show up to Rotterdam and they're actually a cargo of white powder and they're not avocados, you've got to be able to figure out what went wrong. You need a paper trail. And with ordinary databases, if you hack those databases, you can delete the edit history. You could delete every single signature of any customs official who had ever purportedly handled that shipment. But with blockchain technology, remember, you can't delete the edit history, right? And so every single official who stamps that and inspects that cargo and signs off on it and all that paperwork is stored in a secure way with an audit trail that you can trace, and you can go investigate when something goes wrong. And so it's a key development if you actually do want to take paper records that have been kept paper for reasons of hacking and auditing and put them onto a blockchain when the stakes are very high, because the stakes are high when it comes to tracking international shipping. And the pilot was so successful that by the end of 2016, Maersk and IBM had put 10 million of Maersk's 70 million shipping containers onto the system. And in January, they announced a new joint venture, TradeLens. And TradeLens is a new company offering this blockchain-based tracking of international supply chains as a service. And TradeLens has over 94 partners, over 154 million shipping events recorded real time on the blockchain. And so it's growing fast, and it's being challenged by other people and other entities that are trying to also develop similar systems, because people are seeing this as an incredible opportunity for generating economic value into the future. So blockchain technology, it's hyped. And it's hyped not just because of the volatile prices of cryptocurrencies. It's hyped because we have some incredibly challenging problems facing our world. And blockchain technology gives us some hope of starting to solve those problems. So how many people here have a smartphone? I think it's everybody, right? And it's not just smartphones, it's electric cars. The advent of batteries in our modern lives pose a tremendous opportunity here in Africa because many of the rare minerals and metals required for those batteries are actually mined here. And it also poses a challenge for how do we sustainably and ethically mine those metals. So up to 80% of the world's cobalt is mined in the Congo today. And cobalt is a key part of all of these electric batteries and all of the smartphones. It's a key part of the batteries in electric cars. And researchers are working very hard on figuring out how to use less cobalt, but regardless, the demand for that cobalt is increasing exponentially as the world becomes more connected. But the challenge is the mining in cobalt mines is often not done ethically. And so it's estimated that 35,000 or more children are laboring in Congo's cobalt mines, particularly in artisanal mines. And part of that is because those children can earn more in the mines than they can earn in other areas. And so, and the other challenge is the mines are very untransparent. So they don't really let people come in, inspect them, inspect their operations. And a lot of consumers are not even asking the question of where are these minerals being mined that are used in our smartphones, and are they being mined ethically? But people are starting to become aware this is becoming more and more of an issue. And people are starting to propose blockchain-based solutions to actually tracking the cobalt, where it comes from, but it's still very early. We're in the very early stages of this issue. That said, for diamond tracking, we have very robust projects. So Everledger is a several-year-old company that is starting to save billions of dollars for insurance companies around real-time tracking diamonds, tracking where did those diamonds come from, what is their quality. Everledger actually has a new real-time diamond tracking system that they've just this year released that tracks the diamonds in real time along with their Kimberley certificates. And so it's incredibly rapidly evolving system that's saving money for insurance companies. It's helping to keep conflict diamonds separate from conflict-free diamonds. And Everledger is not the only player. So De Beers has actually just concluded a successful proof of concept using blockchain technology to track diamonds. And this is one of the things you'll notice in these examples. There are some very successful pilots. There are starting to be some successful startups. But this is a huge potential market in the billions and even trillions in a decade. And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of competition as well. And that's what happens when you have opportunity. Many players want to compete on which system will win. And this technology is very early. So the ability to put smart contracts onto the blockchain has been possible for only 3 years, since the release of Ethereum in 2015. So all of these examples are brand new. Even Everledger was founded. It was founded in 2015, but after the development of Ethereum. And so this is part of why we don't yet have players that it's clear that they'll be dominant into the future, and there's so much opportunity. So another problem that faces not just Africa, all of the developing world, and even the developed world, is the problem of fake medicine. And it's really tragic when you go into a store and you're trying to buy medicine for your child or your husband or your wife, and the medicine is fake, and you give it to your partner, your loved one, and it doesn't work. And that's something that kills 100,000 or more people in Africa a year, according to the World Health Organization. Up to 1 in 10 drugs sold in the developing world are fake. This is a huge problem. So how do we solve this problem? And again, there's garbage in, garbage out. Blockchain is not a silver bullet, but some of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world are actually developing a blockchain-based solution to tracking pharmaceuticals. So Pfizer, Genentech, some of the largest pharmaceutical distributors are involved in a project called MetaLedger. And what MetaLedger is aiming to do is to develop a real-time tracking system for pharmaceuticals so that when you go into a store, the issue with these pharmaceuticals is one's fake, one's not fake. They look exactly the same. It's impossible to tell using the naked eye which one's real. But with a blockchain-based system, you could have a QR code that links up to your blockchain-based system. You scan it, and you can tell immediately if it's a QR code that's been blessed by MetaLedger or not. So that's the goal, creating a much better system so that we can tell which medicines are fake and which are real and save many lives. So those are some opportunities, some problems. One incredible challenge for Africa is financial services and the financial services systems. And one of the reasons that that's a challenge is many transactions take place in the form of micropayments. And when you're sending micropayments, you're sending under $1 a day between folks, and you're sending millions of them, transaction costs produce an enormous weight. They're really a problem. And so Walla, which is actually a South African startup founded by a woman named Trisha Martinez in Cape Town, Walla was very successfully supporting mobile payments. But the problem was transaction costs were really hurting the network. And so what Walla has done is actually released a digital asset currency, a cryptocurrency called Dollar, that's being used today for millions of transactions here in Africa with no fees. And these no-fee transactions are now supporting new energy markets in Uganda. And so in Uganda, there are many folks in Uganda who are actually using Walla and Dollar. And Uganda, their central energy markets have partnered with Dollar and Walla to support the development and deployment of using Dollar tokens to pay for solar energy in Uganda. And using these Dollar tokens, this digital asset blockchain-based network, it can support giving grants of energy to the poorest people. And you can have a tamper-free ledger of all of those grants. And so you can audit them. You can see, are they being given to people's friends? Are they being given in a clear and corruption-free way? And it's not just startups. So this issue with reducing fees is a problem that plagues traditional banks. And Project Coca actually, just a few months ago in June, successfully concluded a blockchain POC with the SARB and the other major banks here in South Africa. And it was very successful. They were able to process the whole of a day's transactions in under 2 hours with 100% settlement rate, full confidentiality. But part of what's preventing a full rollout of blockchain-based POCs with traditional markets with respect to financial services is the regulatory question. And that's what SARB says as well. And for those of you interested in learning more about this, Tanya Knowles and I will be having a masterclass this afternoon, and we'll be talking about this further. So that's some of how blockchain technology is being used today. And in our final moments of the presentation, we're going to be talking about its future. So one of the powerful things about blockchain is that not only does it have the power to disrupt traditional businesses like shipping and financial services, but Facebook and Google and Uber and Amazon are worried about blockchain technology. So Mark Andreessen, a very famous venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, has said, software is eating the world. If you're not a software company, you'd better become a software company, because otherwise some software company is going to come along, eat your margins, and totally disrupt you. But now software companies are worried about being disrupted by decentralized software companies, because Amazon's margin, Amazon has 10% margins. Their margins are opportunities for new decentralized systems that can operate with lower transaction costs in decentralized ways. And so Sergey Brin, who's one of the founders of Google, has actually said that he's concerned that Google's behind in the blockchain race, and they're starting to devote efforts to blockchain. And so one of the very powerful things is that as blockchain is actively used by consumers here in Africa in a way that it's not being used in the US because our systems are relatively adequate, there's the opportunity to leapfrog. So before we talk a bit more about that leapfrogging, I want to share with you the cutting edge of blockchain technology and how blockchain technology itself is changing. So remember, with blockchain technology, we have a decentralized database. And so what that means is each of us has a copy of the information in the database. But what happens when a new transaction is logged, right? So with the new transaction, we actually have to update everybody's copy of the database at the same time, in the same way, securely. And guess what? Updating everybody's database and everybody's copy in the same time, in the same way, securely, is really hard. And that was only first possible in 2009. That's why Bitcoin is the first blockchain, and that's the consensus mechanism. When you update the database in the same way at the same time across the nodes. But Bitcoin uses an old consensus mechanism. It's the first consensus mechanism, but it's old. So who here has heard about Bitcoin using a lot of energy? And Bitcoin being slow? Bitcoin is slow, and Bitcoin uses a lot of energy because Bitcoin uses the old way of updating the network, something called proof of work. But now we have new options for updating the network. So Tezos is actually a new network that its mainnet went live last month. It's operating today, and it uses a new consensus mechanism called proof of stake. And that's very powerful because Tezos can be updated with much less energy and much faster than Bitcoin. And it's not just Tezos. There's tremendous research today in new ways of updating blockchain-based networks in ways that even move beyond blockchain. So what makes a technology a blockchain? What I would say is that each copy, each node on the network updates in the same way at the same time. But then every single node on the network has to store the whole history of the blockchain. So think about what happens as scaling of the network happens. What do? Each node has to occupy more and more memory at an exponential level. That's clearly going to cause problems. And so researchers today are actively looking into new ways of updating the network beyond blockchain. Ideas like Hashgraph and Kadena. And projects like Hashgraph and Kadena are using new forms of consensus, updating the network in the same way at the same time that rely on something called sharding, where it's not that every single node on the network has to have the whole copy of the whole history of the blockchain, but instead you can prove that the network as a whole is decentralized, prevents editing of the edit history, and can support cooperation among parties that no longer trust each other. And you can prove that for the network as a whole, but each node doesn't need to update its own copy. And so this is powerful because this is where this technology is evolving so rapidly and so fast that we're in a situation where the future of computing may very quickly move beyond what we today call blockchain technology. But what's important for you to remember is that this abstract subject, this talk of databases and how we share and store information, holds the key to radically evolving the way that we do business across a range of industries, such that that 3 trillion number that I suggested from Gartner Research is small compared to some other numbers I've seen from MIT Digital Currency Group and others. And so we have tremendous opportunity here. And what's exciting about that, being here in South Africa, being in Africa, in a continent where blockchain technology is being used today by consumers in their daily lives, just like mobile payments leapfrog the West here in Africa. I think there's tremendous opportunity for blockchain technology to help leapfrog not just payments, but land records, financial services, insurance, supply chain management here in Africa. And so for those of you here, you are the people who understand your industries, understand your markets, and can come up with ideas of using this new technology to transform and disrupt your industries. And so I invite each of you to think, how might you use this new technology? Imagine it's 1994 and you're just learning about the internet, or 1992 and you're just learning about the internet. It'd be very hard to predict Airbnb in 1992. And the real decentralized applications of the future that matter, they're coming, and I think you'll be the ones to create them. And so with that, thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. My email's here. Please feel free to reach out with questions or ideas as they come up. And such an honor and pleasure to be here with you today.